The city of East Wenatchee is in a growth boom, with new housing and commercial development expanding in all directions. Along with growth come related impacts on city services. It's also a time of transition at City Hall. Police Chief Randy Harrison is retiring at the end of the year. He leaves the department still reeling from a labor dispute that resulted in his receiving a no-confidence vote from police officers. Voters will also be selecting a new mayor for the first time in 23 years. City Council members Jerrilea, Crawford, and Tim Detering are looking to replace Steve Lacey in the mayor's office. We're joined today by Tim Detering and Jerrilea Crawford, who are seeking election to the post of mayor of East Wenatchee. Tim Detering, first of all, let's give a little background on you. First of all, Tim is a East Wenatchee City Councilman. Mm-hmm. You've been serving since 2012.
Yes.
Your occupation is with the Chelan County PUD as a project manager. Mm-hmm. You're married and have 4 children.
Yes.
Your wife's name?
My wife's name is Dawn. She's a teacher out at Rock Island Elementary School.
Fantastic. Jerrilea Crawford has been with the Wenatchee City Council, a member of the council since 2016.
Correct.
So really, you're not the new kid on the block, but fairly recent.
Yes.
On the City Council.
Maybe not a freshman anymore.
Okay. You also work for the the Wenatchee Valley Chamber of Commerce as a deputy director.
Correct.
And you're married with 3 children. Your husband's name?
Chris.
Chris. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's start off, first of all, with the issues pertaining to growth in the city of East Wenatchee. First question, what are your thoughts on the development of the Wenatchee Landing area located north of the city limits? How do you see that impacting the city, either negatively or positively or both? Let's start with you, Jerrilea.
Sure. Yeah, the Wenatchee Landing project is pretty exciting, especially now that we have some sewer funding to reach out there. The Port of Douglas County has been working a long time on some ideas of what that could look like, and I think it will only benefit East Wenatchee, the city of East Wenatchee. Of course, it's quite a ways away from the city limits, but there's plans for housing, there's plans for winery, there's plans for outdoor recreation space. So I think all of that will just be a great addition to our side of the river.
Do you see that in any way as any competition to the city of East Wenatchee in terms of revenue generation and that type of thing, Tim?
I do, but this is a conversation that we've had. I've actually served on that committee that helped develop the sub-area plan for the last 4 years representing East Wenatchee. So I'm intimately familiar with the discussions as well as how this thing has all come about. And that was one of the discussions that we had early on, is we want this to be something that will promote growth and new businesses, not just pull them out of the city as well as out of Wenatchee. And there will always be some of that. So that is a little bit of a concern. However, as Jerrilea said, there's going to be a lot of opportunities that will also come. So there are benefits to having that out there.
What would the impact be on the city of East Wenatchee's infrastructure as a result of the build-out, let's say, or the full development of that Wenatchee Landing? Could that have an adverse impact on the city?
No, it would only have a positive impact. As the infrastructure develops and grows out in that area, then the area between there and the city limits, which ends at 19th Street, will then have the opportunity to start developing at a higher density, which is more of an urban area density rather than the way it is currently. So I think it's only going to be a positive by having the infrastructure moving in that direction.
I was thinking through economic development also comes jobs, more people to the East Wenatchee area. Can you support that from a housing standpoint, Jerrilea?
Yeah, well, housing is an issue all around, not just in East Wenatchee. I think it's going to actually be more of an issue for East Wenatchee because we are the space that has room. So when people are looking to move into the valley-wide, they're going to be looking towards the East Wenatchee side.
It has become somewhat of a bedroom community, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So the more development we have and the more job growth we have, the more needs we're going to have for the appropriate housing on many levels.
Are you seeing any migration from Grant County into East Wenatchee as far as their economic development is concerned? I know Boeing, with its increased presence at the airport in Moses Lake, and Microsoft and the big server farms and such, we're seeing a lot of economic development there. But is that translating into, let's say, people coming to East Wenatchee as a so-called bedroom community?
You know, I think you are seeing some of that because there's a quality of life that we have here in East Wenatchee and the Wenatchee Valley in general. I know a lot of people who live in this area and commute to, especially Quincy, with the data farms. But that's also one reason why in the 5 years I spent on the Planning Commission, we put a lot of thought into how we would set up the urban growth area and what those zonings would look like so that we would have opportunities for all types of development and hopefully be able to bring in builders and developers to build densities that would make housing more affordable, but would also make opportunities for our children to have places to live here, even if they're working in neighboring areas. So I think the economic growth in the neighboring communities will impact us to some extent, just because we have an amazing quality of life here in the valley.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Jerry?
Oh, I think I've been outdoor billing, and I've already met 4 people who telecommute and work here. They choose to live here because we've got great schools and we have less congestion, and it's a beautiful community to live in. And so people want to be a part of that. And if you can work, telecommute, or just travel back and forth maybe on a limited schedule and still be here in this community and raise your family, I would do that.
One thing I'd add to that too, Steve, is in the time I spent on the Link Transit Board of Directors, we had a lot of discussions as to how we could coordinate our transit system with Grant County's transit system for these people who actually commute from one and cross over into another. So we are looking at alternatives to make transportation and that commute time a little bit easier.
These are really becoming regional issues and not really isolated to East Wenatchee, Wenatchee, or anything else.
Yeah.
While we're talking about growth, I suppose transportation fits into that general category. How would you describe, Jerrilea, the current state of infrastructure, namely roads and streets, in the city of East Wenatchee right now?
Well, we have a 6-year plan for transportation on some of our roads, and keeping that current and up to date. Of course, it's very expensive, so it often revolves around funding and where we can get some funding resources to help with offsetting some of those costs. Really excited to be working on 10th Street here in the near future. That one has been on our list for a long time, that it keeps kind of recycling back through. Now we have some funding to get some of that done more affordably, and we'll be going out for a loan. But keeping up with those projects and staying current with those, I'm really passionate about safe access to schools, kids not walking on roads, and finding those partners where we can make sure that we're improving our school access areas and making it safe for our kids and our families, especially around parks and schools and so forth.
I know it's a case of competing for those dwindling streams of revenue that are coming from the state and the federal government for streets and roads. You're a member of the Wenatchee Valley Transportation Council, which is kind of a regional planning authority that covers both Chelan, Douglas, and all of the cities contained therein. Has that been an effective way for East Wenatchee to get funding for the projects you need?
It has been, actually, and part of the reason for that is because East Wenatchee has done a really good job as far as planning and putting together projects that are more shovel-ready, if you will, coming up with a good comprehensive plan, as Jerrilea was referring to. So when we go and ask for funding for projects, we have a pretty comprehensive idea of how those fit into our overall scope of what we want our transportation to look like within the city, as well as around the city to get to and from. So it has been a very good funding source for us, and we've been very, very fortunate that we have been able to get money for a lot of the projects that we have done.
Obviously, the 10th Street project is the number one on your list to get accomplished in the coming year. Any other projects that you can think of offhand that you'd like to see done in East Wenatchee?
As far as transportation projects that aren't on our list already? Oh gosh. Yeah, well, as those Grant Road heading up to the airport, there's some concerns on that intersection there on Eastmont and Grant Road, and looking at projects like that and how can we fund those. Those are big ones.
Those are big ones.
And those are big ones. Of course, there's the roundabout that's going in now on Highline and 3rd Street, and watching that develop. I think that'll be I think everyone will really like that roundabout.
I think so.
I think that one will be the most well received in the community. But yeah, there's as we get through our cycle of projects, new ones come on, and as our community grows, we get a little bit more wear and tear on those roads.
On the topic of roundabouts,
you had to go there.
I have to go there, unfortunately. But what are your thoughts, Tim, on roundabouts?
After talking with the Department of Transportation, who've done a lot of studies on this over the years, because this has been a topic for both of the terms I've spent on the council. Studies show that they are very efficient. They're much safer. It takes people a while to get used to them. I'm a fan of roundabouts. Of course, if you try to squeeze them in too small an area, sometimes they don't function as well as they should. But as far as moving people through an intersection and having as little impact as possible, I'm all for them. I think they work well, and they're much less expensive to install and to maintain.
Well, there's a safety component with roundabouts as well, and the city has a paramount duty to offer safe routes, and they actually, you might still have fender benders, but they aren't going to be as significant and cause as much maybe physical harm or damage to property.
Law enforcement, big issue, big topic of discussion in East Wenatchee right now. You have a chief who's going to be stepping down, retiring at the end of this year. And right now, as of this recording, the council is preparing to discuss the process for recruiting a new police chief. How do you think that process should move forward, Jerrilea?
Well, I like the idea of using an agency to do an employment search. We're working on a short timeline here if we want to have a new police chief in place.
When is he leaving?
December 31st is what he gave us his final day. I think it's a little aggressive to be moving. We aren't quite sure who the next mayor is going to be, and I think I believe that the current mayor would bring us into the process, whoever is the next mayor. But I think we both probably feel that a little more time looking into the issue would be beneficial to us in making that decision on the next police chief.
Okay, so you feel that you would prefer to wait until after the election then and into the new year before you select a new? Or?
Not necessarily. I think the process starts as soon as possible. But let's face
the actual decision.
within about 3 weeks, we're going to know who the next mayor is going to be. And at that time, then you start moving forward with that process. But as far as actually selecting it, I agree, it's pretty aggressive to think you're going to be able to get through that in a couple of months. So we'll be in the process. Whether it's completed or not really depends on the qualities of the candidates and how thorough you want to be.
Okay, we're a little constrained for time, but I did want to cover the topic of law enforcement in the city of East Wenatchee, especially in the aftermath of the LEMAP review that was done in connection with grievances by the Teamsters Union that represents the police department. How would you describe the state of law enforcement, especially management-wise, within the police department right now, Tim?
Well, it's interesting. I just did a ride-along with one of our sergeants who happens to be the shop steward on Friday night, and so we got to talk at length about this. I think there's a lot of disconnect at this point, and everybody is looking forward to having a fresh start. One of the things that came out of the LEMAP that really was poignant to me is the lack of communication. There seems to be a real disconnect. There was the physical disconnect, but there also seems to be a disconnect between management and the officers at this point, and those are one of the things that I think really have to be addressed. We have an excellent group of people in our police department. They just need leadership that is fully engaged and that is interacting with them in a very positive way at this point moving forward. There will be changes. New chief comes in, there will be differences, but I think everybody is ready and excited for that.
Jerrilea?
Yeah, I agree. The police department, the officers, they are committed. They're committed to their jobs. They're committed to the city. They really do want to do a good job. I think the police department is fractured, but I don't think it's broken. I think they're ready to roll up their sleeves and get some work done. I think the officers are really eager for some new training opportunities and opportunities to grow and do some professional development. I think the next police chief is going to set the stage for that department and how they interact with the community and with each other and how well we do.
Well, we want to thank both of you for joining us here for the time that we have allotted to us. Of course, the ballots are out. People are making their decisions, and you'll be asked to choose between either Tim Detering or Jerrilea Crawford for the city of East Wenatchee and their new mayor. Thanks for joining us, folks.
Thanks,
Steve.
Steve.